friends, what really prompted me making this video was the headline that in England they're removing the words "Our Father" from Our Father church prayer. So this prayer, known by the name Lord's Prayer, is by far the most famous and the most prominent Christian prayer for all denominations. And a year ago, when I was making this video, I was kind of thinking, really, are they gonna reach, will they manage to reach really that far to remove the actual God from God's prayer? Because in the prophecies it was said that they will start making the prayer shorter and shorter, removing all references to God, until at the end the God is not mentioned even once. This is the source which I used at that time, around minute 55 of the video. The monk reads the old prophecies of the gradual removal of all references to God in the prayer. And again, isn't it amazing in what small details the prophecies come true? And isn't it amazing how few are those who care for such prophecies? So they don't like that we talk about Him, God. Before we know it, that can become even illegal. But what are we allowed to? To speak about something similar, and that is like a non-gendered entity? How similar to a being called Satan, who is known to be neither man nor woman, but an ugly mixture of both. Not to mention that the entire farce of confusing the people using language tricks to the point of them forgetting are they really men or women, all that is orchestrated by hereditary Satanists. And while these are actually regional prophecies for ВЕРХОТУРье, where they will be getting rid of references to God slowly, because the people are quite religious, but in other countries they are far ahead and they have removed even the entire Lord's Prayer, the most prominent and most famous by far Christian prayer, entirely from church services. And that's widespread in Norway, Latvia, Denmark, Netherlands, amongst others. And at least all these churches are very straightforward about the reason for which they don't care about the prayer given to them by Jesus Christ. They're interested in more modern prayers which reflect their modern world. And so they put some fashionable prayers instead. Fashionable, like the last demonic ritual Grammy performance, sponsored by Fitzer. So, a few more words in terms of when to expect the beginning of the tribulation. Still around 2025 seems to be the most likely time. Around meaning give or take a few years. And also from the Vyacheslav prophecies we know that things will develop even faster when Putin steps down. So when is the end of his term? Well, March next year will take place the next presidential election in Russia, and Putin has good chances for winning again, although he is not as popular in Russia itself as he is popular abroad. And yet, on the other hand, elections may not be relevant in terms of ending his term anyway, because there is a good chance that the change will come by yet another staged, so-called communist revolution. Yet another timing given in this video is that the Antichrist will openly appear on the political scene 666 days after the beginning of the Russia-China war. So I mentioned camphor in the previous videos, and by chance I found a reference a few days ago that even snakes run away from camphor smell. So it seems camphor is a very practical, most easy to make, do-it-yourself reptilian repellent. Luckily I had some in my supplies and provisions, so I put a piece in a stone holder They sell them for $1 on AliExpress, and it evaporates. Now in winter condition, this paste has reduced already half within a couple of days. And of course, besides repelling dark creatures, you are constantly in a soft cloud of camphor scent. Something else very practical which I have been up to lately is when I heard the news that they are allowing crickets, powdered crickets, allegedly for protein in the food in Europe. I felt this is not gonna end good because they may be planning to go big time with this nonsense, because from the very beginning in the legislation it says not only it is allowed, but when they put it, they are not obliged to specify it on the label, although the compounds in this type of insects are considered by their own official science poisonous to humans, and certainly with very high chances to give allergic reactions. Of course, that's not what is important to me. For me, it's important that this is the most tamasic and consciousness lowering thing you can imagine, to eat ground military manufactured insects. And the way they are going, I don't see what will stop them to offer generous rewards for those manufacturers which put the stuff in their everything, as long as they get subsidized for going green and saving the planet. So I'm still sometimes buying bread from the shop, and mostly I bake my own, but still I get the flour from the shop. So in response to their cricket nonsense, I bought one of these old stone mills. It is not delivered yet at my place, but it is similar to this one, and I will show you once we install it. And in addition, I'm growing some of these old varieties of wheat. It has already sprouted the next crop, because yet another piece of the old prophecies is coming true, that every single thing in the food store will be poisonous. And I'm really puzzled how people can believe that the politicians are doing all that just to feed the people something. If they had even the slightest interest in feeding the population, they would stop, for example, the nutrition destroying, according to their own official science, way of milling, grinding the grains for the supermarket flour and bread, which again, according to their own official scientific tests, destroys some 88% of the nutrition found in the grain naturally. They could simply make legislation to slightly alter the process of milling, and all of a sudden provide very valuable nutrition for the masses. Or they could stop turning down all the good ideas, like for example, there were projects of replacing the park and public places plants with edible species. People have made calculations. A lot of food could have been grown that way, if their concern had anything to do with nutrition for the people at all. So, of your question, is it better to buy or rent? Most definitely buy, no matter how small, because in the Austrian prophecies they have warned us that when they change the money or whatever, the monetary system, of course they will not miss the chance to torment the normal people. That's out of question. And the marked one as well, everybody. Of course the transition will favor only their own big banks. That's obvious, that's how it always has been. That's why the Austrian prophecies explicitly warn to be debt-free a couple of years before everything starts. Well, as far as the Romanian situation, even if they do legislate what they propose with these taxes, still the situation will be much better than many other places. For example, here I think they always had a wealth tax, but actually nobody pays it. Like, for example, also it has been practically legal here to have a solar system, because you have to register as a corporation which produces electricity, and practically nobody did that, and so many people had the solar installations at home that at the end, actually weeks ago, I read that finally they allowed it, just because it would be too difficult to just give out fines to so many people. Look at England, they're effectively banning wood burners at all, wood stoves at all in refurbished London homes under the new air quality rules. It would be barely surprising if they pass similar laws for entire Europe, and then it will be new refurbished homes only in the beginning, then it will be more and more categories into that, and they might be planning to abolish wood burners altogether. Now, will they manage to enforce all that, given all the dramatic events during the tribulation, is another question. We should just prepare to the best of our abilities, and the most important is to remember that God will never abandon those who do not take the new passport, the new stamp, the biometric nonsense. That's why I'm making this series and always stressing on the precision of the prophecies. If even small details, all of them, come true, then is it possible that the most important thing, the protection which the Lord promised to His people, doesn't come true? There is no chance for that. For example, when I was making the video on the VERHOTURYE prophecies, I'm not sure even if I mentioned that even back then, decades ago, before this entire theater with religious extremists, terrorists started, way before that, it was already mentioned that there will be such a bluff just to scare people into surveillance, police state. So we should have full faith in the prophecies. Now, next, you even mention evicting people of their own hereditary houses if they are not green. Unfortunately, it has been already going on in US, probably in other places as well. It will certainly happen to some good people as well. It was mentioned in one of the prophecies that if they take away your house, gladly give it to them, because it's a very small price to pay for being admitted to the kingdom of God. But if they evict an unmarked person, it simply means that the Lord will take care of that soul somewhere else. It doesn't mean that the Lord has stopped helping that particular soul. Yes, you are absolutely right that they are moving fast, and they seem to be moving faster and faster. I'm happy I got my supplies before the store has got to offer only pasta with infected crickets. And as far as paying debt or running off, it depends when is that happening. What if they introduce the CBDC before even the Great Tribulation starts? And also on the practical side, to escape from debt collectors probably won't be enough to run to the countryside, but run to the deep forest. So are you ready for the deep forest for 10 years? That would be the best. But I'm afraid that you are simply in the countryside, they will come after you. And if somebody is still in the city, still not convinced that it is urgent to go to the countryside as soon as possible, just look at the images of the aftermath of the Turkey earthquake. It has been already days, and many of the buildings, these are 5-10-storied buildings, are of course not yet cleared, which means the people are still trapped inside. In Syria, it is even worse. How can rescuers arrive there when they have no petrol for their cars? And besides the natural earthquakes, which according to all prophecies will be getting stronger and more frequent, on top of that, a bunch of insane possessed people have technology to create even earthquakes of their own. And that's like a loaded gun in the hands of somebody who is out of his mind. And for a number of reasons, the people in Turkey, many of them, believe the earthquake was not that much of a natural thing. This cloud was seen days before the earthquake. Maybe it was connected, maybe not. But then there were these blue flashes of light in the sky immediately before the earthquake, just seconds before that. Now I decided to use the search engines to see what are these lights all about. And of course they're assuring us that, oh, these are theories by some crazy people. But what I found suspicious is that such so-called debunking articles don't really speak much about the light itself, but just common small talk. So changing the subject, not convincing. Well, some of them did mention that actually such lights are well-known phenomena, and it's normal. It occurs sometimes during earthquakes, but somehow, because they never gave examples, I thought that is a bit suspicious, and I started searching information on the phenomena of earthquake lights itself, and it is described as a fully scientific phenomena with hypothesis why and how. But some remarks are weird, like from the scientific community. They said, well, the phenomena is kind of difficult to investigate due to lack of any evidence of how and why, and does it really even exist. Well, that must have been a bit of an older material, because, well, in recent years they actually filmed, finally, absolutely legitimate cases of earthquake lights. And surprise, surprise, those were earthquakes that were most probably, or some of them surely, caused by the lunatics who have the technology to do it. And they're insane, and in such situation it's better to be in the countryside. Actually simple, beam-supported houses withstand earthquakes better than buildings of modern materials. This is another viewer question. It actually comes up quite often. Leaving behind all technology whatsoever is the best option. Now, in some of the prophecies, it seems that at the very end, all of those who will not accept the mark of the beast, the New World passport, they will all live in such conditions for a very short time. But I don't know if these prophecies are original, because they are for Russia. For example, Mary Julie Jehani doesn't mention anything like this in France. She doesn't mention the opposite as well. So we don't know how things will play out. But it is good to be prepared, at least with information about what kind of times can come. Like exactly in the VERХOTURье prophecies, they talk about even tracing unmarked people who are hiding in caves, using the tags of their clothing to trace them with modern technologies, which could be even inserted inside the soles of their shoes as well, sealed. Because the JAL is already making preparations for the final stage as well. And then they will hunt those people, the police, using giant mice, which they're breeding for such purposes exactly. So if we reach that far, obviously we won't be able to use washing machines and dishwashers for some time. So smartphones and all smart gadgets and TV sets, they should be avoided as much as possible currently as well. Things like refrigerators and washing machines, I have not read anything about them in the prophecies. Well, I still use them, although they are on my watch list. Modern tools, if they're not electricity powered, I think they should be definitely okay. They should not be discarded. And modern knowledge is a very broad term. There is lots of good stuff in it. A lot of propaganda, demonic propaganda, passes for modern knowledge, although it is not. So they're both mixed, and the more one becomes sattvic, the more one will be able to differentiate for each and every piece of knowledge, is it truth or propaganda. And if one still harbors lots of tamasic beliefs, qualities, and habits, then, of course, such people also often think that they're smart and they can differentiate between true knowledge and propaganda, but this is not the case. They're deceiving themselves. And yet another detail of the prophecies comes through. If you remember in the older episodes, we have been warned since long time that they will spy, they will control each and every small transaction, and they will reach even to the point of policing the thoughts of the people. And here, shamelessly, the Taoists, they are letting us know that they already have the devices, quite simple looking gadgets similar to watches or simple headsets. And yes, the boss will monitor your thoughts, and if you don't like your job, you quit. That's what they tell. In other words, for certain jobs that may be compulsory, so that the boss can tell you what to think. Of course, they will try to implement it in more infamous ways. We don't know how much will they manage to do of that, because they cause earthquakes and natural disasters themselves in a controlled manner. But when God starts sending some of his own, things may turn the way the Bible suggests, that their entire Babylon might be destroyed, to be rebuilt and then eventually destroyed again forever. Now, this is a nice question, and as you know, the Bible language is confusing for most people, very difficult to understand. And as far as Islamic sources, well, they also leave the matter open for interpretation, as you can see from this video, this Islamic scholar. And as you know, when a certain question is unclear, I tend to consult the Vedic sources and set of Jane Roberts, as you know if you're watching my videos, and I guess and I hope that's why you are asking this question. And according to these sources which I just mentioned, the answer is the following. First of all, it should be clear which heaven are we talking about exactly, because it seems heaven is used for different places. Sometimes it can be used to what is called in Hinduism even Pitriloka, which probably in Christian terms will be one of the lower levels of heaven, because there are 7 skies, 7 steps or stages of heaven. Is life there eternal? No, that is just a far more advanced place than Earth. Life is much longer, but it's definitely not eternal. But I guess in most cases in Christianity and Islam, when they say heaven, they probably refer to the higher celestial realms, which are tangibly more different than simply a superb earthly-like experience. Different in a way that there are far more dimensions and possibilities of manifesting things with one's consciousness in a way we can't even imagine currently. If we take, for example, the residents of Brahmaloka, which have the longest lifespan in our universe, that's from the Vedic description, I don't know how many billions and trillions and zillions of years they live. So for Christian sources, that certainly may qualify as eternity, because I just heard from one Christian here that it can be concluded from studying the Bible that eternity means anything which is longer than 1,000 years. Which makes sense, because the language, at least of the current Bible, is at many places so super simplified that how difficult is to interchangeably use something which looks like an eternity for a very simple person and eternity. Islamic sources seem to be in more pure form. They are less edited or not edited at all, but still they were written for simple tribes, and they simply don't offer that type of sophistication and precision in terms of language which modern people expect when they ask questions like yours. But luckily, your question is fully and precisely answered in the Vedic texts. So, heaven can have different meaning as well. Sometimes it is even used to describe the existences which are beyond the boundaries of our universe. Can that be called eternal? Probably that will be the most appropriate word, label from our extremely limited vocabulary, but in no way exact, I think, because we can't even understand, for example, the time flow in some other parts of our universe, so it will be unfair to think that we have a term which will be applicable for places we can't even imagine. So how can we embark on a quest of understanding and measuring time in the realms beyond the universe? The yogis have told us, the yogis who have been there in samadhi, that's pointless. That cannot be described. We don't have the capacity for that. But still, yes, existence of eternal and never-ending joy seems to be a vague hint to what awaits those who complete their education in the material universe. And Seth says that many of us will, others who are lazy, they don't want to face their karma, and they practically remain forever here. Now, speaking of different types of time and applying that to the demonic takeover of Earth, do you notice how their plan has been consistent in strategy over the centuries? For example, it was some, let's say, 500 years ago when the Jesuit monks were forging verses of the Bible so that 500 years ahead in time they will confuse the people of that future time and trick them with a false messiah instead of the real one. This is a clear example of planning on non-human scale. Just think, when we make our strategies, even the long-term ones, they cover maximum couple of decades, because there are so many unknown factors that it is useless to go beyond that. New discoveries of all type, and also the natural conditions and many other factors, can be big game changers at any time. So it doesn't make much sense to make plans for hundreds of years ahead. So obviously, such a precise planning over centuries, this should alert the intelligent people that there is something non-human in this entire game. But sadly, very, very few people look from this type of perspective, and they remain satisfied with a superficial understanding of the things. So the cure for that is to see all the End Times episodes carefully, and never forget that God will take care of all those who will not accept biometry and the new passports.